Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Ravi Shankar. I'm chairman of Asia Pacific Writers and Translators, and this is the 20th edition of Isobreak, a collaboration between APWT and the New York Writers Workshop. And I'm very excited about this episode because we have a number of Indian poets, and it is in preparation for the upcoming conference in Bangalore. It's the very first in-person conference since the pandemic, happening at the end of November, and then flowing on into the Bangalore Lit Fest. So hopefully you can join us. It's free to all Indian writers. And the announcements should just be going out about the programming. I've looked at a early version of the events. It looks really fabulous. So welcome, everyone. It's going to be a wonderful hour. And I want to bring on screen SUKRITA and VINITA, the two wonderful editors of the Yearbook of Indian Poetry. And in fact, they're going to be running things today. So I am very pleased I get to sit back and be part of the audience. And I will leave the emceeing duty to VINITA and SUKRITA. So welcome. So nice to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ravi. I think we're looking forward to this hour. And VINITA and I are also equally excited, and we've been very passionate for the program itself and also very passionate about Yearbook. That's why it's happening. So maybe I could just very quickly introduce the Yearbook to everyone. This is basically the concept which came out very inspirationally between the two of us. And there is both inspiration and spontaneity here, and which doesn't mean there is no hard work, because we know that for anything creative to happen, there has to be just that little bit of inspiration and a whole lot of rigorous work, which we know how we're trying to manage, but we involve more and more people. And we do think that there is a very democratic kind of an approach that we have, so that, we involve, it's a collective, it's really a collective. We too are the functionaries who are making it happen. But the whole concept lies in the fact that there has been a flood of poetry in English, as we all know, for the last few years in particular. And there hasn't really been a very strong sense of tradition in the writing of poetry in English in India so much. So I think we basically brainstormed, the two of us, and we thought, in order to build up a sense of tradition, and also at the same time look at the aesthetics, the evolving aesthetics in the context of Indian poetry in English in particular, we needed to work towards creating an archive. So how does that happen? No formal agency really took that on. And we gave ourselves that position of, slaving for it and also being masters of the ceremony in one sense. And I think that dual role has been very, very enjoyable. We have done 2 volumes already. The latest one is the Yearbook of Indian Poetry in English in basically we call it 2021. Very proud to show it off. And Hawakal is the publisher for this, for both the volumes, and the ongoing work that is just about started actually on the 3rd volume, which is to come up next year. Hawakal, and which really means Kirti Sengupta and Bitan Chakravarti, our publishers. We are very happy that a wonderful collectivity is coming up there as well. And we normally get something like 700, I'm saying normally, like 2 years, we have got nearly 700 submissions each time, which is absolutely exciting, because it has, and also one of the things I have to mention, and we do that every time we talk about this, is that something really great is happening here because of the kind of heterogeneity that you see in the way the selection is done, not just in the way the selection is done, but also in the way poetry is happening here. Because poetry in English is happening from all parts of the country. Remote and far, remote from where, I don't know, but yeah, from different parts, we are getting a whole plethora of poetry getting submitted here, which also means there is variety, just as there is tremendous diversity of cultures in India that we witness, that we experience, and to put our finger on that in the most, I think, in the right way would be to say that there is multilinguality within English that we witness here. That is what is the beauty, that you see many Englishes coming up. If there is an English poem coming up from the Punjab, it would have the reflection of Punjabi culture, even sometimes because some words are used. Or if you go to Gujarat, or if you go to, say, the Northeast, the culture does get reflected, and that culture gets reflected through the way language is used also. So we have multilinguality within English, and I think all this needs to be archived, thought about, and I'm calling out here, like Vinita and I've been talking, critics need to wake up now, look at the yearbook, make use of it, and look at the dynamics of aesthetics, the way they are evolving. And yes, the first volume was basically, in all these volumes it's going to happen, because in poetry is inscribed history, contemporaneity, sociology, economics. You remember, Vinita, we had one of the poems on macroeconomics.
Yeah.
It was amazing,
It was.
So even that could become a poem. So
yeah.
Just depends how
Tishani's poem, Tishani Doshi's poem.
So it was really wonderful to see how mythology, of course, keeps creeping in from this side or that side, between the lines, under the lines. Mythology is always peeping, because we have a living mythology in our country all the time. So it gets interpreted, reinterpreted in poetry in a variety of ways. One of the things that we always focus on is that the yearbook, the selection is made on the basis of the poem. The poem is in the center, not the poet. And therefore, what do? We also do a blind review. It's kind of, how do we do it? Maybe, Vinita, you just say a couple of lines maybe on that. How do we make it objective? The selection has to be objective. It's not Vinita's selection, it's not Sukrita's selection. We are in it, but it's a collective that we are talking about. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sukrita, for sort of highlighting the entire purpose of the yearbook and where it stands and where it's meant to go. But before I go any further, I'd like to sincerely thank APWT for inviting us on the session on the yearbook. We're very, very grateful. Your Isobreak platform has been like the place to go to for any literary event, for any book that comes out. And yeah, the yearbook is really grateful to be featured on the Isobreak series. Thank you very much, Ravi Shankar, Sally, and everybody at APWT.
Thank you.
I
started with that, but it always fills in very meaningfully.
So that's perfectly all right. So actually, I will just very briefly talk about the process of selection, because we have a very exciting, batch of poets lined up from the yearbook who are going to read their poems to you, and also will be reading a poem that has resonated with them also from the yearbook. And then there'll be a quick Q&A at the end of the session. So let me just very briefly talk about how we go about selecting the poems. So Sukrita and I were very particular when this idea of the yearbook was conceived, that we would not be the gatekeepers to poetry. So for that, we constitute a review committee every time the yearbook is being put together. So this has been happening for 2 years now. The third one is due out in June 2023. So the yearbook review committee comprises of very accomplished and acclaimed poets with diverse sensibilities from different parts of India and the diaspora. And we hope that brings in the kind of diverse sensibilities, I have to repeat that phrase again, so that the poems are looked at from all perspectives, and the review committee members do justice to whatever we give them in the form of a long list. And what we give to the review committee is without the poet's name. Every poet goes in blind. And out of the 225 poems that we give them, we request them to select 100 or plus and minus 10. So that's how the selection is made. And the review committee has been extremely cooperative, and they've always kept to their deadlines. And we're very grateful to every poet who's been on our committee for their time, their input, and their generosity in lending their names to the yearbook project. So thank you very much to the review committee as well. So basically, that's how it all happens. And then in the end, SUKRITA and I just sort of tally all the votes that the poems have got, and then we put it together as best as we can. So that's about the yearbook selection process. Now, I would like to invite Anjali to read her poem. And what we'll do is we'll invite all the poets, ask them to read their poems from the yearbook. And then we'll have a second round where they will read another poem from the yearbook that's not written by them. So Anjali, before I invite you, I have to tell you this, that we had a session on the IIC platform, and Shilpa Thaplial spoke about your work, your poem, and she said that when she read your poem, she just couldn't carry on with the work she was doing. She had to just take a break, sit down, and sort of collapse into that moment that your poem had generated. Honestly, it was such an evocative, it's such a profound piece. And we're so proud to have your poem in the yearbook. And we request you to read your poem, please.
Really an honor. Thank you so much, Vinita. Thank you, SUKRITA, Vinita, for inviting me. And I will, of course, and I think each of us will probably say this, but hats off to you for starting this initiative. It will eventually form a really valuable archive of Indian poetry in English. And thank you, Ravi, for having us on board on the APWT platform in the Isobreak. I read my poem. It's called Warren. This morning, I noticed there was a tunnel that runs from my house to yours. My desires, discarded every night as worthless as used condoms on the brothel floor, lay heaped against the wall in a corner, hiding the cavity so expertly, like a magician who shoots an arrow and it flies in the opposite direction, seeking vengeance from a day filled with monotony, looking for escape, for it churns a hunger as turgid as the seeds in the earth when girls become women and women become girls, while the river flows oblivious to the light that falls on its waves, wanting them to rise and birth 100 sons, yet the earth births a daughter who will stay close to her side and share her ache, since the black soil is wet with humus and sweet is the smell of decomposition that leaves a skeletal filigree behind, as delicate as she has been. But eventually they are only bones, for the flesh has disappeared, some torn away by hyenas who must feed their passions, and the rest given willingly in bargain for pleasure, duty, or buying peace and respite from a thirst that will never be quenched even by 1,000 rivers, a thirst that rises from the depths of desperation and fear, that rises from deprivation and the dread that she will be cast out with such a weak hand against an opponent who holds all the trumps. And yet she lifts the mask in that dark forgotten corner where she discovers a tunnel that she can pass through to reach your home from mine, and that each home has a tunnel we can join up, an endless catacomb, a subterranean network, if only we uncover that heap lying discarded in the dank, dusty corners we were so afraid to look at. Thank you.
Noted the lack of full stops and the way you read it, that gave validity to the way it's been written without any full stops. Yes. And I particularly love the metaphor of the hyena in this context, and also the fraternity of women that's been evoked. Yes, in this beautiful, beautiful poem. Thank you, Anjali.
Very metaphorical.
Extremely metaphorical and raw and so gutting, you know, when you talk about those women there who have to sell their bodies for a living. So may I now invite JINEADRA to read his work. I believe JINEADRA's poem is very is a short one, so But it's a beautiful poem, Jinendra. Over to you. Please read your poem.
Thank you for the kind words, Vinita, and thank you, Vinita and Sukrita, for putting this together. The poem draws inspiration from the opening stanza of Sudarshan Fakir's Nazam, Ye Daulat Bhi Le Lo, Ye Shohrat Bhi Le Lo. And in format, it kind of blends the Nazam and Ghazal formats. So here goes. Those days. You can take all the rusting gold I secreted away, for those monsoons until childhood slipped away, those petrichor smells, flooded lanes, and paper boats that floated away, those long power cuts, rooftop cots, and sultry summer nights chatted away, those last row wooden benches we fought for, and the whispers when teachers looked away, those childhood vows of togetherness, JJ, and the smiling faces that have faded away. Thank you.
That was beautiful, and what a lovely epigraph to choose from. So lovely. Thank you very much.
And without any sentimentalism. Because
yes, so restrained, extremely
yes.
restrained. Yes. So may I now request SMITA Sahay to read her poem and also say a few words on the yearbook, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ravi, Sukrita, Vinita, Anjali, Gayatri, JINEADRA JAIN, and all the dear lovers of poetry. The beauty of the yearbook is that it takes us all beyond, the myth, the misunderstanding that the Indian English poetry is a fishbowl. It's not. Just like Sukrita just mentioned, and just like you've just seen, these snippets of poems from the yearbook, you see that, it's an enormous layered landscape, and it's a very very important movement, I would say, because I can see that it's going to have longevity. I can see the series, the sequence, the thought in the design that has gone into this. I can see how the process has been democratized, because there are also hierarchies and gatekeeping, like Vinita and Sukrita mentioned, and it is very humbling, and at the same time, I also feel like a poet. I feel gratified as a poet to become a part of this, because I get to see so many new names, so many new voices, so many new ways of writing poetry, so many new ways of expressing and processing the anxieties of writing, of being an Indian poet, along with newcomers of poetry, and be published alongside stalwarts, whose poetry we have studied, whose poetry we are still learning from. I see this project easing new readers into poetry, because readers are sometimes apprehensive of touching poetry for the first time. But this makes their job so much easier. This makes their anxieties, this kind of soothes their anxieties. It also takes the various contemporary traditions, like Sukrita was mentioning, of Indian English poetry, and it firmly places us in the landscape, this ever evolving landscape of global poetry, of global literature. So I think this is a very important project of curation, archiving, and a lot of it's been done very mindfully. It's been done with a lot of the intellectual rigor is obviously there, but it's also a project which has been done with a lot of heart, a lot of love for the poets, for the readers, for teachers, editors, curators, students. So I'm very grateful, and I congratulate everyone who is a part of this project, and I thank you for this opportunity to read today. So I would like to read this poem called Light Again, which is a part of a trilogy based on a coal miner of Jharia. And the coal mines have been underground. There have been underground fires, and it's a landscape which is forever in a crisis, because there is land subsidence, there are fires breaking out, and at the same time there are flooding now. And a miner's life is also very difficult, because it is seen as a job, but while a miner goes in, it's not a given that the miner will also come out alive of his or her job. The other thing is the erasure of the women working in mines. So this is the third part of the trilogy, and it was inspired by Dante's Divine Comedy. So this kind of loosely responds to the Paradiso of Dante's Divine Comedy. Um, Light again. Coal dust preserves within my cells an agony that would otherwise be homeless. These mines are my inheritance, as they were for my ancestors. My spine shivers as I step in. Above, the horizon still bleeds. Why do the living exhume pitch black ghosts? Whose tribe was this now fossilized into coal? What do we live for? What does one die for? Someone calls out, but the voices of men are hollow in these tunnels. The air is damp with sweat and tears. I place my forehead on a cool black wall. The earth whispers her secrets. These coal lumps were once refugee stars in search of a new home. As they landed softly, I took them into my folds and grew around them a grief-hardened womb. Listen. They murmur a prayer for the sun to rise and croon a cradle song to dead children. The heart of a lost star, this coal lump is crystallized absence, frozen time, rest. Outside, this lamp fires engines, glows in the hearts of homes. In a child's liquid eyes, this coal lump gleams like diamond. Her laughter is soft, toothless. Nirjala's daughter, they call her, the women who have outlived their own children. Sleepless from a night shift, smeared in coal black, I bury my face into tufts of baby hair. Nirjala's daughter, I whisper. Her fat fists dance, willing the sun to rise. Somewhere, Nirjala smiles. Dawn breaks, the Shama bird unfurls an auspicious song. Here, for now, draped in light, we are together once more. Thank you.
Searing
Beautiful.
poem. Yes, and I think when you write about coal mines and coal miners, I think you're almost paying an obeisance to your roots. And nobody in India, I haven't noticed anybody else in India or the Indian diaspora look at this subject and write about this. And we are very grateful that you bring this the issue of the coal miners and people who go into coal mines in the dark dungeons of the coal mines for a job, but who have no guarantee of coming out of it alive, and the perspectives of the women that you've mentioned, and the liquid diamond eyes of the child, who so beautifully written. I'm so grateful to have that poem. Sukrita, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just this that, I think these poems, the way they're coming, and particularly this one and many others as well, what you see is that there's a certain kind of ground reality that is forefronted. So what I see is that there is kind of realism, hardcore realism, and at the same time, there is the poetic content, the way it is done. And that is why these are the aesthetics that are really, really very meaningful. There is a sense of contemporaneity, but at the same time, you see this as if it's been happening forever, and we are not, as you rightly said, we are not paying attention to this reality. So that's the typical poet, The poet has to point out the finger to a specific thing which is taken for granted and blindly overlooked, Thank you, Smita, for doing this poem.
And thank you also for the very concise introduction to the yearbook in your own words. We really appreciate that, and you put it across very, very well. Thank you. And before I move on to our next poet, I have to also add here that when we were doing this series of interviews with very accomplished poets, and one of them was Sampurna Chatterjee, and she, in the course of our discussion on the yearbook, she mentioned your poem, and she said that that was one of the poems that really stood out for her. So there goes. That's very validating as well as for a poet. May I now invite Gayatri Chawla, who also has she has this distinct flavor of Sindh in her poetry, and that is another unique aspect, unique proposition of Gayatri's poetry, which I deeply admire. And her poem is about that in the yearbook. So I'll invite Gayatri to say a couple of lines on the yearbook and also read her poem, please. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, SUKRITA and VINITA, for inviting me for this reading session in association with the APWT and New York Writers Workshop. Thrilled to be here. And I must say I'm privileged to have my poems published not once but twice in the yearbook. And the yearbook is very unique. It's unique because of one, the review committee, that's, it changes. The review committee is different every year. So there's a change in perspective, and it's an eclectic mix of wise and new writers and poets. And of course, the submission process of reading a poem is blind. So, the poem is doing all the talking and not the poet. That's, again, so special. And of course, lastly, I feel that, if you want to just savor a slice of India, or better still, a slice of Indian poetry in English, you should just flick through the pages of the yearbook. And because you see there these distinct, diverse voices of poets from different cities, different homes, narrating different stories. And that's enough to satiate your appetite for poetry. There might be a theme that is running similar to a few poems, but they're definitely not on the same frequency. So you have these diverse voices, and that's what makes it such a rare collective. I like to read my poem. The poem is about a place where my father was born. It's about a place I've never visited, and it's about a place I intend to visit one day in this lifetime. Sindh. Sachal rests in the cobalt blueness of the walls of Daraza. The city he never left holds his shrine, in her folded hands seeking the divine. Sachal breathes in the sienna brown lotus stem fritters, sold door to door by the weary vendor, wrapped in withered paper, time-warped aftertaste. Drink from the chalice of love, intoxicated in the ebb of separation. He comes alive in the folk tales of Moomal and Rano, sung by Amma, sitting on a charpoy, smoking ferociously from a brass hookah. She's 94 now, quilting an ajrak mattress, inherited from the ancestors of her ancestors. Imbically connected to the land and its people, Sindh, the land of Sufi saints, brazen and stark, a contagion of faith, bellwether of nostalgia. Raise your hands to the Lord in the sky above. Oneness is contagious and resides here. Thank you.
Your poem is almost a cultural quilt of the land that you one day want to visit, and we all know what that land is, which that place is. And I leave it to SUKRITA to speak more about this poem, because she also has a whole history of.
Yeah. The poem resonates so much with me, Nita. I always feel, one reason why, I keep accepting invitations from that side of the border. but it never materializes because some political turmoil or the other happens, and the borders are sealed again and again and again. And this has all got to do with the fact that it's, again, we're talking about roots, we're talking about identity. We're also talking here, particularly when there is a reference to Sachal and Sarmast. Is that true, Smita? This is Sachal Sarmast, isn't it?
Gayatri, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Gayatri, is this
Sarmast.
Yes,
with
I'm talking about
Sachal
Sachal Sarmas,
Sarmast?
the Sindhi Sufi poet,
Yeah.
18th
And
century.
isn't that the irony that there is this so much of Sufism that is talking about oneness? And this oneness is talked about with reference to separation. That's the irony, isn't it?
How
I mean, the
well
kind of division. It's so sad. And the irony is inbuilt into the poem. You don't even have to work hard to discern that, because this is what it's all about. You talk about peace because there is war all the time, right? And it becomes an occasion to talk about peace then. So what are we doing as humanity? These are the pangs of so-called progress of civilization. So thank you for inviting us to this land of both ironies and sadness and pathos. And yet I think this should go on because it is this push, a certain kind of emotional a reference point that we should not forget, and keep getting pulled to. We do get pulled towards it, and sometime, somewhere, I hope not too much in a distant future, I hope that we manage to go across, right?
Thank you, Sukrita, for summing it up so well. And I'm going to invite you now to read your poem from the yearbook.
Oh, me? Okay. All right. Thank you. That's a very pleasant surprise. Okay. Okay. So this is something, actually a kind of ongoing poetic venture that I started about a couple of years ago, which is off and on it gets life, and then I start writing. These are called Dialogues with Ganga. So each unit, in one sense, is complete in itself, and yet the carryover happens because these dialogues are in the form of reference to Ganga. Dialogues with Ganga. The emerald green of the river waters is the green of the forests softened. The blue is that of the skies, and the brown that of the mud carried to the plains. With many a million corpses and ashes in your belly, what of the color of death, O Ganga? But death, you confirm, has no color. It is transparent like truth. In the din of the river, the sound of the universe vanishes, and echoes of silence rise from within the mind as confessions. O Ganga, I am ready to perform my life again. When there is lightning falling on your chest from the coal ash skies above, why do you not pause? Hold on to it tight, O Ganga, for the forests to light up, for the hanging bats and owls to go back into dark holes. Let the birds fly and chirp, let the nightmares crumble into daylight. Shed all ghosts and demons to the oblivion. Fill the void with music of your fast-moving waters. I think I'll stop here because this can go on. Thank you, Vinita, for this opportunity. Maybe, do you want to read now or would you like to read later? That's for you to decide.
I think I'm going to read my poem now at the risk of behaving like a self-obsessed MC. Not done, but I think I'd like to read my own poem now, and then I will read the poem that resonates with me from the yearbook in the second round. But I do wish you had completed your poem, Sukrita, because the last two stanzas were so evocative. And I look at this poem of yours as a song. It's something that is universal of all rivers, even though it wears the garb of Ganga in your poem. And it's such a poignant piece. So anybody who knows me knows that I feel extremely strongly about the species extinction that's happening as a result of the climate catastrophe. And not just climate catastrophe, but as a humanity, we've wiped out already, since we came onto this earth, we've wiped out 50% of the species that existed once on this earth. So my poem, Splendid Poison Frog, is a poem about that, but it looks at only one animal. Splendid Poison Frog. Was it a cold December Wednesday when you left? A frosty, flinty, pinpoint moment that seals most pullouts? Silent like a hushed Mayday signal, reverberating in the ripples of a pond. What time exactly did you hop over? To where nowhere exists? Did the sun flicker at your vanishing act? The way yellow convulses on a color palette when mixed with green? Was it the hour of dusk, your favorite hour, when you looked your dashing heartthrob best, skin brilliant, coral eyes, coal black? A fungus with a long name colonized your body. A local phenomena, some said, like a cloud breaking up a balmy summer's evening. Did the next morning feel like a fine after showers morning? So the next round is our most exciting round, as well as was the first round where poets read their work from the yearbook. Now I'm going to invite Anjali to read a poem that spoke to her from the yearbook. Over to you, Anjali.
Oh, I think you're muted, Anjali.
I'm here, yes. I'm sorry. In fact, I had chosen your poem, Vinita, to read because the first time I heard it from you, it really moved me. But since you have read before me, I would like to read a poem by Sarabjit Garcha, because this poem, I don't know, as many times as I hear it or read it, am I audible? Yes, I have unmuted myself. Thank you. So this poem by Sarabjit Garcha is called Unending. It's hard to know how tiny that room must have been, the room in which only one man could lie down on a night the town was dangerously close to being drowned in rain. It isn't hard to know what a knock on the door meant. The door opened, and soon there was only enough room for two to sit, the rain writing its unending story outside. Another knock, and there were three standing shoulder to shoulder, faces to the wall, facing the street. The story doesn't say anything about a window allowing light in, or a bulb hanging from the roof, or a kerosene lamp fashioned from an ink bottle with a wick thrust through a hole in the top. The story also doesn't say anything about a third knock announcing the arrival of fourth man. Had there been another seeker, we know what would have happened. The first one to open the door would have stepped outside, letting the other two sleep standing up, letting the last guest cross the threshold and enter the new room that the other two had just built with eyes shut. A room so wide that the whole town slept under its roof, the rain writing its unending story outside. Thank you. Thank you, Sarabjit, for writing this beautiful poem, and thank you, Sukrita, Vinita, for having it in this wonderful book.
Beautiful choice, very beautiful choice. Vinita, you seem to be on mute.
Vinita, we can't hear you. Well, Sukrita, do you want to, while we...
Maybe while the thing is set up. Yeah, I think we could go on to, this was a beautiful choice and lovely to have such a variety out here. And I also need to, maybe just say a statement or two even about Vinita's poem. I think most of the poems here, including the one that was just read, there is one common thing, the restraint, the element of restraint. There isn't a kind of there is spontaneity, but it's not like words letting loose, getting loose, loosely being built up. So we love that particular trait which kind comes up poem after poem. Maybe you could go on to Jinendra now. Jinendra, would you like to read a poem of someone else's and give the reason why you may be reading that poem today, right?
Thanks, Sukrita. I've chosen Jayanta Mahapatra's After the Death of a Friend. So I'll just get on with the poem first. Over the kite's flight, and of a sudden is the realization of the morning overcome by the echo of dark nights, silent witness to the colorlessness crouching down before us. Stealing time is what's been happening all the time. Is it because you've heard only your cries? 50 years earlier too, as they go by, adulterated with death. Or some shy crumpled laughter carrying with it the air of an unspoken but certain defeat. Somewhere in my mind, I lose the ability to disappear as the morning air moves listlessly about, indifferent to looks or history or roots. And here, if I died like this, dying for the person I was, or for the one I see coming in and out of your death, would that be a way out to save me from the solitude I believed in and pursued, in the same way I pursue the rush of blood in my veins? There is so much we've begun to pile up on you, more than all the lives we've had and have lost. Nothing whatever burns to ash. Years pass, days, wisdom, the simple sadness. A slow moving ray of light walks me backwards to a past turned magical by virtue of its emptiness. This part of myself that never fails to embrace us. Thanks.
Wonderful. Excellent choice again. And if we may even mention it here, why this choice perhaps? Would you like to say something, Jinendra, or should we talk about it?
No, I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
All right. So, Jayanta Mahapatra, it just so happens that it's his birthday today. So this also comes as a kind of a gift, this reading. I hope that he may not be listening to it, but we will send him a recording for this. And he figures in the yearbook as one of the three poets whom we chose to put them in as beacon lights. And why did we create this? Because these are the stalwarts who have always been beacon lights to all of us, the next generation. And I would also like to add that, the idea is also to show as to how this poetic sensibility continues to be with them even today. And so these poems have been written in the recent past. And in fact, during the same period as, the other poets writing who appear in the yearbook. So this is something that we wanted to mark as part of the yearbook. This is a new feature for this year's yearbook where we've added beacon lights. And perhaps this particular feature will stay on. Let's see how we continue, because there is a dynamic about it and we have to test it out. Vinita, would you like to add anything to this?
Yes, actually, I just wanted to actually go back. Of course, I endorse everything that you've said. And Jayanta, it's a very poignant occasion to read his poem, to have his poem read around his birthday. I think his birthday was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. But nevertheless, thank you, Jinendra, for reading that very evocative piece. And I know for a fact that it was a very personal poem. It was truly about the death of somebody who was very close to him. So it came straight from his heart. Sukrita, I actually want to go back to, I want to know which poem Anjali read because I completely missed the audio of that and it was my loss entirely, so I had to re-log in. So,
Yeah.
but
Anjali,
yeah.
would you like to talk about it a little bit? A sentence for Vinita?
I read Sarabjit Garcha's poem
Yeah.
called Unending. It
Yeah.
resonates more with me, of course, because I'm from Mumbai and the rain is a constant factor in our lives.
Yes. Yeah.
But not just that, it's also that particular thing is so
Yeah.
valuable that
Yeah.
even when there is no room, you
Right.
make you make room for the other
Right.
person. And when the room is full, you go out and let the stranger come in from the rain, which is an emotion we need so much today. So that therefore I chose that.
Wonderful. And it's lovely that you went so deep into that poem and understood
Yeah.
his words so perfectly. So may I now invite Smita to read a poem from the yearbook as well?
Thank you, Vinita. So, I would like to read Case History of Pain by Kinshuk Gupta. I'd briefly like to tell you why I chose this piece. It's very difficult to choose one poem from the yearbook. Um, there are such powerful, moving, poignant poems, beautifully crafted. So this I have rather picked up simply because it resonates with me, my experience of life, my experience of physical and emotional health. Some of my closest friends and some of my family members know that I have been sort of been an apprentice of physical pain and depression for a very long time. And in spite of going to the best doctors, sometimes it's very difficult to put your finger on it and find a cure or treatment for it. And this poem becomes doubly meaningful because Kinshuk Gupta, the poet here, he himself is a student of medicine. He's, I think, is in his final year of MBBS. And he has written this poem called Case History of Pain. You should be able to pinpoint it. Abdomen, upper half, left side, a hand's breadth from the last floating rib. Compare it with ballpoint's prick or knife's stab we were taught in medical school. That winter, when the sun bleached and roads jacketed in snow, I saw a grainy green chameleon on a branch, his beaded eyes peeling away, excuses that kept me spooning Plath's tulips, leaving me hungry for whistling Malabar thrush, hungry for donuts dunked in sugar syrup, sweet at first, then tart on the tongue, hungry for wind saturated with salt. Your bent knees were peaks, and my body moored into your valley, borrowed the orchestra of your breaths, in and out, loud and loud gasp. That winter, I feared greasy, five-toed depression, its coiled tail, its pale, flaking skin. That winter, when I asked my father to drive me to the therapist, he told me, bear, bear like a man. That winter, dread spread in mom's eyes when I rode shotgun in the car. Friends wishing, go to God, begging in scented temples, my prayers hissing in ears like clumsy bells. That winter, I fell upon dreams changing colors. Gunmetal sky, burgundy bruises, pea soup fog. That winter, the psychiatrist said, your disease is fictional. Depression is alive only in black and white. That winter, I kept searching for lithe silhouettes as reptiles' eyes scanned my body. That winter, I wished for wicker coracle of sleep, dreamt of eyes hidden in warping cyclones, woke up to eyes beaded in jet black sky, craving sleep again, like a prisoner pardoned for a crime he didn't commit. That winter, before the chameleon cracked whip of tongue, I learned that pain is only pain with a name. Searched for sounds in the language sheltered in my bones. It's unholy to think that the war is over when guns stop shooting. When he rolls back his tongue to swallow me, I kept running and running and running from the pistol of his eyes. Thank you.
And this is one of my favorite poems also from the book. And the use of the anaphora that winter is very, very fine. And I love the verbs that Kinshuk uses. I really admire him for his use of verbs and the anaphora of that winter in this particular poem. And may I also mention here that SMITA is the founding editor of the Usawa Journal, and Kinshuk happens to be the associate editor of the same journal. So it is very, it was kind of syncretic, that you should read that poem from his work, from the yearbook. Sukrita, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I just feel that, it's very difficult to be talking about pain and also depression. It's like, a very abstract phenomenon. And yet when it comes to feeling it, it's so solid. It's so solid and so personal and so private, To find metaphors, to find words to describe that phenomenon in itself, I think, is an art. How do you do it? How do you do it? Just like, I also paint. And the other day I was thinking, supposing I want to paint what pain is. I'm still figuring it out. I don't know how I'm talking about it, because usually I don't talk about work in progress. But how do you concretize an abstract idea of that kind in the form of art? And I think Kinshuk does it well.
And also that line, I learned that pain is only pain with a name.
Yes, yes.
Very, very fine.
It all, yeah.
Thank you, Smita. May I now invite Gayatri to read a poem of her choice from the yearbook.
This is a poem by Gopika Jadeja. It's untitled. It starts with the epigraph by Aga Shahid Ali. Is my love nothing, for I've borne no children? I'm with you, Sappho, in that anarchist land. Move into a rented house in a foreign land and imagine that you're making a home. Tie a toran on the doorframe. If there is no garden, plant a jasood and a champa in pots. Here you can even find a mogra plant. In the botanic gardens, you can see an Ashoka tree along with orchids. 2 years ago, there was news of people flocking to see the bright orange flowers of an Ashoka in bloom in Jiangsu Kang. Now, not the tall, false Ashoka that the British favored in India, a real Ashoka. The kind they say that Buddha was born underneath. There are many large trees here, far from buildings, far from me. Move into a rented house in a foreign land and imagine that you're making a home. Thank you.
And me.
Gopika
And I'm so
Jadeja.
happy that you have read it. So obviously there is somewhere we are resonating with it, the two of us. Just like in the earlier poem that you read, which was your own. Lovely to feel that companionship here.
And also Gopika is a representation of the diasporic poets that we have in the yearbook. And you can clearly see those very Indian words of the mogra and the juhi. I think she mentions a couple of names of flowers, and she contrasts them against the orchids. She lives in Singapore, I know that. And the orchids are, they grow in Singapore. And then there she's pining for those the flowers from her homeland, and all the other things that are in the poem. So great choice, Gayatri. That's one of.
And Vinita, we might as well remark here also that there are quite a few poems which deal with the idea of home.
Yes,
You know,
it's been a very poignant theme that's come into the yearbook of, especially from the diaspora section of India, where they've been pining for home through language, and that is a especially sort of sensitive connection.
Yes.
So I'm going to invite you, Sukrita, to read a poem of your choice from the yearbook now.
So since this poem has already been read now, so I'll read another one, which is kind of, again, this is an idea that has been with me for a very long time in the context of, language, the use of English language. And in my days of youth, this was a hot debate as to why one writes as an Indian in English. So this has been an ongoing kind of a concern also. And I believe that in both the yearbooks last year as well as this year, we do have a poem or two on English language. So I choose to read Foreign Language by Debashish Tripathi then. All right. My tongue twists English into a tight knot in the auditory cortex, and my fingers curl it into a nest of matted letters. My identity, my speech, hardly decipherable, my beliefs, smothered in suspicion and self-doubt, my adopted language, my writing, silent and cursive, curdling and cursing, and intoning cuss words like prayers, the incense stick in the center, the smoke spiraling into cryptic scripts. I think, I dream vernacular, and then translate high speed, frame by frame, word by word, grammar and spell checks, insertions and deletions. They mock the progenitors, they correct my concepts, my phrases. I decode, I interpret, a mutation in the sequence, style and structure, a recombination traits that differ from my progenitors, and I am who is ostracized, who is not seen as one of our own. I am mutant, an error caused in the interpretation of a primeval vocabulary, the pig reared in a sanctuary to generate organs and corpses for a market which buys in a foreign land. I write bad. I talk worse. I am caught in limbo between my goals and my status quo, an apparition alive, attempting to land in heaven with a mortal body and soul, caught in a nowhere world, in a word vacuum, my languages, my identity, crossbred and crossed. Thank you.
Crossbred and crossed. And I'd just like to hold up the poem just to show everybody that it has a very special format. So those spacings between the words in a given line act like punches to the people he's attacking on the issue of language. And when you hear the poem, you might assume that he's attacking, the English-speaking land, maybe the Americans or the English people, because that whole colonial baggage comes into the minds of most of our writing now. But interestingly, I was just reading his bio as you were reading the poem, Sukrita, and he's from Odisha, and he's actually coming from this vernacular, sort of a position. And he's talking about the English-speaking Indians, actually, not really the English-speaking Americans or the English people.
Yes. So there are borders and divisions within, right?
Yes, exactly.
So that's what we also call another kind of colonization.
Yes,
right?
indeed. Indeed, it is.
Colonization.
It's a mental colonization. Yes, indeed. So that was a very good choice. And you've been speaking about this whole language and the many Englishes that exist in India. And I think this was one of the representations in a way of that, in a way. And so that gives me the opportunity to read a poem that has resonated with me very deeply. I go for poems which are extremely sensitively written and sort of, have this, that goes straight to the heart. And it's a very, very short poem by Manisha Sharma. It's titled, I Had a Boy. And I could read this poem a million times and not get over that absolutely searing effect of its meaning, So it's one of my favorite poems from the yearbook. I can say that unabashedly. I Had a Boy by Manisha Sharma. Into layers of my makeup, I whisper, a girl is Shiva drinking ocean poison and yet surviving as Neelkant, blue-throated. So, I had your brother and dissolved you with a pill, dark blue running down the inside of my thighs. Dark blue running down the inside of my thighs. That's the poem. So short, but so profound in meaning. And it is about gender. It is about losing girls to boys, the choice that many families make in many parts of India. And it's just gut-wrenching,
Totally.
And a woman has to kill her own girl child. Imagine that. The fetus, let's put it that way, the female feticide. This is what it's about. It's a very beautiful poem. So I think we've got to the... Yes,
it takes me to Margaret Atwood's book, The Handmaid's Tale. And kind of, it just leaves you dumb after that. You're not able to speak.
Absolutely. This is one of those poems. Forever it's going to be one of those poems for me.
Yes.
Congratulations, Manisha, on writing this poem. And I think we've gone through the gamut of our reading and the reading of the other poets as well. So over to you, Ravi. Can we open this to question and answers now? Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all. What a wonderful event. And the book, Hawakal Press, is going to be an annual endeavor, right? And so the call for submissions will be coming soon.
They've already come out.
They've already come out.
Yeah. The call for submissions is out already. And we will put that out again on our social media. So people who missed it out the first time can see it now.
Wonderful.
The next time. Yeah.
So I want to thank everyone. This has been Isobreak 20, Yearbook of Indian Poetry. I have put in the links. There's a link to the upcoming conference in Bangalore. It has a wonderful group of over 100 writers have already signed on, and we have Gitanjali Shri, the Booker Prize winner, will be there. Ma Jian, the dissident Chinese poet. Victor Mallet, Hungarian British journalist. And it's writing outside the frame. So a lot of attention will be paid to hybrid kinds of writing, textile arts, all kinds of very exciting things. So hopefully you can join us for that. And I'm going to now bring everyone back on screen, and SUKRITA and VINITA can have a discussion with everyone. Thank you all. It's been wonderful. I'm Ravi Shankar. This is Isobreak.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome back, everyone. And firstly, thank you very much for your reading and your comments on the yearbook, and also for reading other poets from the yearbook. So grateful and so wonderful to hear all of you. And so how do we take this forward, SUKRITA? Do we have...
That's what I'm wondering. Are there any questions anywhere? I don't know.
I was wondering if there are any questions, or maybe if we could have any last comments from all of you. Let's start with Anjali.
Yeah, no, not a last comment, but I would appeal to all the viewers who don't already have this book to go buy it. It's available on the Hawakal site and on Amazon.
Yes.
Yes, please, because it's a treasure. It's really a treasure, and the spin-off from it is then you go and buy the books of the authors who have been published. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, that's well said.
Thank you, Anjali.
So let's
Love
look at
the
this.
spirit, yeah. Love the
Yes.
spirit, because I think we need to realize that, somewhere publishers and readers and writers, poets need to come together by virtue of the fact that this is always a give and take. If we don't buy these books, how is poetry going to survive? When we say in the market, which means for readers, how is it going to survive? So I think, Anjali, this was a very good gesture, calling out to everyone to buy the book, because otherwise, a lot of us just take it for granted. A book has come into the market and not even visible many a times, not even visible in a bookstore, So one has to really go all out, look for the books. And this is available on Amazon, so I don't know if it's available on Flipkart, is it? I don't know.
Not on Flipkart, but it's available on Hawakal website and on Amazon.
Yes.
And I really liked what Anjali said, that each poet's poem is a window to his work, his or her work. So go ahead and explore those poets further if that work resonates with you.
Yes.
And that's very well said, Anjali. Smita, any comments from you? Yes, sir. Yes, Sukrita.
And also the particularly, even if one is not an academic, I think we need to also bring up the culture of reviewing,
Yeah.
And if all of us are reviewing each other's works, it helps a lot. It helps a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, one gets to know where one needs to buck up and where one needs to perhaps, feel strengthened. And
Right.
a poet's morale is always asking for that, craving for that. So one needs that particular kind of a support.
Yeah.
So we need to really be reviewing with discretion, but reviewing.
Yes, Sukrita and I have always been, we've come to this conclusion that India needs a better review culture of poetry books, and it needs to be done with gumption as well as with more force and plurality and in more number. It has to be more in number rather than just one or two here and there. So we need to, maybe the critics and the libraries who are interested in stocking poetry books are listening to all of this, and maybe they can work their way around this somehow. And the book reviewers, of course. Sukrita, Smita, would you like to say anything?
Yes. I want to urge all of you who believe that, poetry is not meant for you to go and pick this book up, because it will change your mind. Of course, it's an art form, it's a genre of literature. But, above everything, poetry is solidarity. Above everything, poetry is freedom, liberation. And I have seen that, I have seen the kind of healing that poetry can bring. Just when Sukrita was talking about Kinshuk's poem, and she was talking about how even as an artist, it's difficult to bring the abstraction of pain. See, the thing is that, language language fails beyond a point, and still poet use the tool of language to keep pushing those boundaries, so that, our humanities don't fail against that boundary. Our humanities, our sensitivity, our sensibility, our pain, our joys, the complexities that we are, that doesn't that doesn't fail and push against a wall. So this is the festival season, and buy this volume, buy the last volume also. It's available. Gift it to people, especially young people. This poetry is going to bring a lot of freedom, lot of liberation to, and all of us need it. With a small, I just want to also request all of you to spare a moment for everything that's happening in Iran and Ukraine. And on that note, I want to thank all of you for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Smita. And may I add another word to the list of words that you just said about poetry? May I also add that poetry is very cathartic. And for young people reading poetry, who knows, it may bring the catharsis that you're looking for. Young people are sometimes extremely disturbed about various things. The social media puts a lot of pressure on their minds. So somewhere maybe poetry is the avenue where you can find your calling, find something that resonates inside of you and gives you succor and whatever, I mean, that kind of peace, poetry may bring you that. Jinendra, would you? Yes, Sukrita.
No, I was thinking, when we're talking about stress and anxiety and, a kind of, I'm using a hackneyed word, but rat race that everybody's in, particularly for the young, they inevitably have to join into that rat race, So I think that what poetry can do is to offer an opportunity for one to pause and reflect. And that is not happening adequately at all. Just pausing for a minute and just stop to read a poem here or there or whatever. And immediately that liberating factor that you're talking about, it liberates the mind from the anxiety that you're going through and takes you into the mood of reflection, thought, and depth of emotion, which I think is very important to hold on to.
That's very, very important. It's very, very important to reflect and take a pause and actually feel peace in all the running around that you're doing, which has to inevitably be done. But somewhere there can be a corner where you can sit with a poetry book and maybe that may bring you peace. Gayatri, would you like to add anything?
Well, I resonate with all your words, and I agree with Smita that poetry is healing, and there's no other thing that can heal you other than words, And I would say the yearbook here, I think we can all, if we have the book, we can just raise it like that and say that yes, it's a window to imagination, realism, and healing. So buy it. It's available on Amazon. To buy a copy.
Thank you, Gayatri. Jinendra, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I just echo the call made here to go and buy the book, to read poetry. And I speak from personal experience in that I had an interest in literature, but in India, in those days, I'm talking the 80s, you became an engineer or a doctor or nothing. So I chose to be an engineer, then became an MBA, then spent 25 years in banking, and then found the courage to pursue this as a hobby on the side, as a part-time banker, right? But I think it's only when people go out and buy can those who have the talent and the ability and the passion to do this full-time, that's the only way they'll be able to do it. I mean, outside of academia, because how many people can academia absorb at the end of the day? So, yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and for putting this together.
Thank you, Jinendra. So those are very practical words from a latecomer into poetry, who spent his life 25 years of some other kind of service, which is also very, very important to sustain society.
Yeah, but Vinita, this particular fact that, engineering and MBA and so on, all of those faculties are required to write a poem. I honestly feel that. Because it's not like when I was talking about pain and not, I need to have an architecture for the poem then, isn't it?
Yes,
I need to build it up. I need to construct it. I need to have an engineering sense. Just as an engineer requires to have the sense of art, I think give and take is very important between disciplines.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why you're writing a very good poem, and it'll get
yes, absolutely. And while the left brain may give you all the content for your poem, it's your right brain who will, deal with the craft of actually putting it together. Right. So it's always it's always good to have a person like you, Jinendra, to speak about the worth of poetry. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words.
Yeah. So thank you once again, all of you. It's been wonderful hearing your words and listening to you talk about poetry and the worth of poetry, which is even beyond the yearbook. It's poetry per se. So that was wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And 3 cheers for the yearbook and may it live long.
Hip hip hooray. 3 cheers. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all. This has been another edition of Isobreak. I can't believe it's been 20 of them. Looking forward to seeing some of you in Bangalore. That will be really lovely. And thank you for sharing the work and conversation. It's very early here in the U.S., but I'm really will be going forward in my day with those words ringing in my ears. So
Thank you for being, there for us in the early hours of the day.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you,
and this
Ravi.
will be archived on YouTube, and so we can pass it around to everyone once we're finished. So
Great.
stay safe, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
You
Bye.
too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.